going on, everyone? So, reports came out once again, per The Athletic, that the San Antonio Spurs are Kevin Durant's preferred landing spot. That Kevin Durant wants to go to the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I talked about this before because there were other reports from other Spurs people that his camp, as well as Kevin Durant himself, wants to go to the Spurs, right? Amongst all the other teams, yes, there's all these other teams that are in the mix, right? But the Spurs are the team that he most likely would go to and wants to go to, right? Now, here's the thing. Just because he wants to go there, just because his camp wants him to go there, there have also been multiple reports that the Phoenix Suns are looking for the best package available, that they don't necessarily care where Kevin Durant's preferred destination is, and that supposedly they even told him that, like, hey, we're going to send you to the best package possible, right? They want to get the best return possible. Now, that very well could be San Antonio. Question is San Antonio willing to pony up what is needed? Now, I still fully believe that if Houston wants him, right, Houston can go get him. And if Kevin Durant is open to Houston, then they'll probably land him, right? Because again, Houston has their picks, so they could give up, one or multiple of those picks, as well as they have a ton of young players that would make sense for the Suns as future trade chips or guys that they can kind of develop and grow. If they ever do eventually pull a Devin Booker trade at some point or something, if this just doesn't work out and they're like, all right, let's just hit the complete reset button. So there is that potential there, where with the Spurs, it's like, they trading Jeremy Sohan. There's some reports that are conflicting there where some are like, no, they're not. Some, yes, maybe they will, right? So it just depends on what the Spurs are willing to pony up in order to land a Kevin Durant. I don't necessarily think the Spurs are going to sell the farm for Kevin Durant, right? But you do have to pay to play. And I do think it depends on what the overpay is, right? Like if it's, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and, the 14th pick, and then like 2 future firsts, right? Might be a slight overpay, but it's like you have Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle, Victor Wembanyama. It's like, how many young guys are you going to keep adding to your core, right? If this kind of gives you, it also depends on how high the Spurs are on Kevin Durant. Do they look at Kevin Durant as like, he's a guy that comes in and immediately raises the ceiling if we make another move or two that puts us in contention status, right? If not, then I don't think you should trade for him, period. Right? Like, where do the Spurs gauge Kevin Durant? Because, like, for myself, right, which, again, by the way, doesn't matter what I think, doesn't matter what anyone thinks, it matters what the Spurs think, right? What do the Spurs look at? But for myself personally, I look at Kevin Durant as definitely a huge ceiling raiser. And I do think there is a version of this team with Kevin Durant that could be competing and contending for championships, maybe even hoisting the Larry O'Brien at the end of the season. But I don't know if Kevin Durant by himself is enough to now go win a championship, right? Like, I don't think the Spurs are Kevin Durant away from immediately winning a championship. Now, again, a couple factors in play. One, what does Victor Wembanyama, there we go, words are hard, right? What does Victor Wembanyama look like in year 3, right? Does he take some significant strides, some significant leaps, right? Now maybe we're talking, right? What does De'Aaron Fox look like with a full training camp, a full preseason? Because look, Spurs traded for De'Aaron Fox, and it didn't really change their trajectory of wins, right? They actually had a worse win percentage. So, and there were questions dating back to Sacramento of like, does he actually impact winning? Excellent player, right? One of the best closers in all of basketball, one of the best fourth quarter players in all of basketball, but he's not contributing to wins on a regular basis, right? Well, you saw that with the Spurs. Now, again, very different. He's kind of thrusted in, and then Wemby goes that, like, there's circumstances and context that is important. But, if he comes in and now he's not the guy, he's, the second or third guy on any given night, maybe again, that's enough to raise the ceiling. What does Stephon Castle look like in year 2? Right? What does Dylan Harper look like as a rookie in year 1? And what other kind of minor moves? Like I've talked about, I'd prefer to keep Harrison Barnes. If you have to lose Keldon Johnson and keep Harrison Barnes, I'd rather keep Harrison Barnes. One, he's an expiring contract, right? So, you have that as a potential trade chip, which we've seen the value of expiring contracts later on down the road. But also, even if you get Kevin Durant, you have to solve your other forward position. And I think Harrison Barnes was really good for them last year, gives them that stable vet and can slot into either forward spot for them. And then now you at least bare minimum have your starting five going forward. Obviously, if you could upgrade in other areas, then do so. But at least you have him as a piece. And look, you could always, after the season, re-sign him to a much smaller deal as he gets into his later years and just have that veteran off the bench that can come in, knock down some shots, maybe play some defense. We'll see kind of how he ages, if he ages gracefully or not. Again, to me, it really boils down to Kevin Durant, right? Like if Kevin Durant, if he really wants to go to the Spurs and his camp really wants him to go to the Spurs, at what point does he start making some pushes, right? Because one way to get to the Spurs would just be to tell everybody, I'm only going to re-sign with the Spurs, right? That's my preferred place. That's where I want to go. I will just sign with the Spurs. Now, look, that doesn't necessarily lock him into like, oh, that means he's going to the Spurs for sure, but it might scare some of these other teams away. Supposedly Minnesota is completely out of the equation, and Kevin Durant doesn't want to go to Minnesota. There are reports that the Suns are hoping that he kind of reconsiders, right? Because they really want some of the pieces on Minnesota. But if he doesn't reconsider, you're already seeing Minnesota out of the race. If he goes, I just want to go to the Spurs, I'm only going to re-sign with the Spurs, that might take Houston out of the race, right? That might take Miami out of the race because they might look at it and go like, hey, we don't want to have to pony up what we'd have to pony up for a guy that may end up leaving us, right? Now, again, you might get teams like supposedly Toronto. The Raptors are open to trading for Kevin, basically doing the Kawhi Leonard thing where, they trade for Kevin Durant, even if he's not willing to stick around, even if, and maybe go try to make a push in a wide open East to maybe go win a championship. And then maybe if they do, they can convince him to stay. If not, then it's like, hey, we just got another championship. It worked again. They're a team that might be willing to take the risk, right? So there are teams that still might take the risk, but it's probably fewer and less likely, right? If teams are kind of like, a great example is you saw Anthony Davis do that with the Lakers. Right? There were teams like Boston and Spurs and all these other teams that were interested in maybe trading for Anthony Davis. And then Anthony Davis and his agent were like, you can trade I can't stop you from trading for me. But just to let you know, if you do trade for me, as soon as this year is up, I'm going to go sign with the Lakers. So you're just going to lose whatever you gave up for me. And it scared everybody off, and the Lakers were able to get Anthony Davis. Now, the Lakers still had to pay for Anthony Davis, right? So, again, the Spurs would still have to pay for Kevin Durant. It's not like, oh, now we can get Kevin Durant for just, Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson swap. No, you'd still probably have to give the same package, but it might take everyone else out of the race to where now the Suns are like, okay, we don't have a choice. We got to send him to the Spurs, and maybe the Spurs don't have to give up as much, right? So maybe instead of, Vassell, Johnson, the 14th pick, and then 2 future firsts, maybe it's just, Vassell, Vassell, Johnson, the 14th pick, and maybe 1 future first, right? Like saving that extra first could go a long way. Or maybe you were going to have to include Jeremy Sohan, but now you don't have to include Jeremy Sohan, right? So again, it could maybe benefit them, but again, it's not something where it's like, oh, now they're going to be able to get him for basically pennies on the dollar. No, it's still have to pony up, but it might scare some of those teams off that are in the negotiations going like, hey, Kevin Durant wants to go there. So how bad does Kevin Durant want to go to the Spurs is really what it boils down to for me personally. And then also, how badly do the Spurs want Kevin Durant? If they really want him, then it's like, pony up, right? You're going to have to pay to play. Again, whether we want them to do, I don't want them to overpay for Kevin Durant either, but again, it doesn't matter what we want. What do the Spurs value him as? If the Spurs believe he's the piece to go win you a championship, then what are you doing? Right? Go get him, right? Because if you're right, then you look like geniuses. You just pull off a championship. Wemby's got one early, maybe it's 2, especially if you win 2. If they go trade for Kevin Durant, let's say, worst case scenario, they trade Jeremy Sohan, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell, the 14th pick, and 2 future firsts, right? That's a great overpay in my opinion. But if they go win the championship this year, nobody's going to care, right? Everyone's going to be like, who cares? You won a championship, right? That was more than worth it, right? But that's the problem. Do the Spurs believe that? If they don't, then stay out of it. Let him go to Houston or something like that. There will be another star. There will be other opportunities. You have a great young course. Stay the course. Kind of evaluate this season. See what comes available during the course of the season or at the trade deadline. Every few months, there's a new star that wants out, right? So, like, again, to me, it's just kind of be patient. But let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. As always, this is a discussion. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. If you enjoy these types of videos, I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.